Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro Podcast, the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. My name is Jerry. I'm your host. I'm a former chiropractor. I help chiropractors now with websites and local SEO. I help new chiropractors get started. I help stuck chiropractors get unstuck. And I host this little podcast. Today, we are going to talk about micro practices. I had a client that reached out to me. He was asking me about the micro practice model. He is an associate. He is wanting to start his own practice. He's been helping out, filling in for some docs, and he's interested in the micro practice, kind of boutique style practice, as a way of getting started. And he had some questions, and so I thought this might be a good opportunity to talk about what exactly are the fundamental aspects of a micro practice, like what makes a micro practice. And then we're going to talk about what should you charge, and we're going to talk a little bit about the type of services you should offer and just some questions and things you should be thinking about if you want to go down the route of the micro practice. So we're going to do that all today on this podcast. Now, before I do that, I do want to say, if you want a better chiropractic website or you want help with your local SEO showing up more in the Google Maps, reach out to me through Rocket Chiro. If you'd like me to look at your website and SEO and just give you an overview of where you're at, some recommendations, show you how you compare to other chiropractors in the area, you can go to my website and request a free website and SEO review. I'll be happy to do that. No obligation, no pressure, no name calling, nothing like that. All that can be done at rocketchiro.com. If you want to go beyond the podcast, you want some additional information, you want more access to me, you want to get unstuck, or you want help getting started, check out my Next Step program. It's a great place to do that. It's month to month. It's affordable. It's tons of really valuable content, and I can help you along the way, whether you're there for a month or two or you're there for a year or two. Doesn't matter. Totally up to you. It's a resource that's there for new chiropractors or stuck chiropractors. All that can be found at rocketchiro.com. All right, so this is my thoughts about the micro practice. Let me just tell you this first of all. When I got out of school in 2004, which was a million years ago now, and it makes me feel like I'm just old as dirt. When I got out of practice, or when I got out of school, there was a bit of me that was a little bit bias against the micro practice idea. And I don't even think we were using the term micro practice. We just would refer to these as poor, unfortunate chiropractors who can't have a real practice. Like that's kind of how people thought of that. There might be a part of you that still sort of thinks that way, and I really want to push against that. I want to push against the idea of being a real chiropractor. You have to have a certain size building. You have to have a certain number of employees. You have to take insurance. You have to do this. You have to do that. I think all of that is absolute crap. And when you try to pay your bills with what other people think, you're putting yourself in a bad spot. And so I would say if you think that about being a chiropractor, you're probably putting up obstacles and barriers that don't need to be there. If you're thinking that because someone else put that on you, then tell them to go fly a kite. That's the nicest way I can put it. And just ignore what they're doing and just understand that you absolutely can have a micro practice, not only in the short term getting started, but you may love your micro practice and you may want to keep it for the next 15, 20, 30 years. And that's okay. It does not make you less of a chiropractor. And anyone that says otherwise is just an idiot. Probably a prideful idiot also. So let me just get that off my chest. All right. So what is a micro practice? Different people have different definitions of a micro practice or a boutique practice, but there's three aspects that I'm going to talk about real quick, and then we'll kind of get into charges and services, stuff like that. I think that one of the fundamental things of a micro practice is low overhead. So generally it's a practice that has one or two rooms, but if you happen to get a really, really sweet low overhead situation and it's a standalone building or it's your own space and it's more than one or two rooms, like I'm not crapping on the fact that now you don't have a micro practice. It doesn't have to be a certain size, but generally you're talking about one or two rooms because when you get those bigger spaces, your overhead goes up. So low overhead is a fundamental part of a micro practice. Usually you're looking at one chiropractor and no staff. There are some people that think that you can have a micro practice and have staff. I tend to think that sort of puts you into a different category. And I'm not saying that that's a drastically different category or a drastically different way of practicing. But when you start adding staff, there's different complexities to practice and there's different things you can and can't do and stuff like that. Like my practice when I was in practice was one doc, one staff. Now I had a couple different people that work for me, but usually there was only one person in the office at a time. And so, I didn't ever consider myself a micro practice, and I wouldn't say that I had a micro practice because of that staff person. That kind of put me out of the category. So low overhead, one chiropractor, no staff, and then efficient. And this is where the failing point of a micro practice is. If you're not efficient, you just can't do it. And I would actually, if you don't have low overhead and you're efficient, you can't do it. I mean, it's like these all sort of go together, and they're really, really important aspects. So we're going to talk about what I mean by these things. So low overhead. Once again, I think this is one of the most important parts of the micro practice. I think it's one of the most beneficial parts of the micro practice. It makes it so that almost anyone can get started, and it makes it so that you can actually start a micro practice part-time. So if you happen to be a parent where your time is limited and you want to start a practice or do practice part-time, or if you are an associate and you want to open your own practice, or you're filling in like this doc that I talked to, if you're filling in for other chiropractors, you can fill in for other chiropractors and be starting and working on your micro practice at the same time because of that low overhead. That low overhead allows you to not put yourself in a bind financially and time-wise so that you can't do something else. And even if you were working for Amazon or you're doing something on the side to make a few bucks because you need to for your family, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Like, I think that we should probably be trying to check our pride at the door. And I know that that's a difficult thing to do. And I say this from my own personal experience. I'm not saying that I'm the most humble person and I've always made good decisions in this area. That's not at all accurate. It's probably the opposite of that. But I'm telling you that the beautiful thing about the micro practice, because of that low overhead, it allows you the freedom to start pretty much. If you have bad credit, good credit, whatever, you can get started. If you have a lot of money, no money, you can get started. If you need to do it part-time and do something else on the side to kind of help you out in the meantime, you can do that because you're not putting yourself behind the eight ball financially. It gives you a lower financial stress for you. Now, I will say the downside is going to be there is some limited scalability with the micro practice. If you're someone who are like, man, I want to have like 5 different doctors that work for me, I want to have 6 different locations, and you're really entrepreneurial in that way. I don't know that. I mean, maybe the micro practice is a way of getting started, but you're definitely not going to do it very long term because you're going to have to get out of that situation because the scalability of bringing in staff and bringing in people and having people do things for you, like you just really can't do that within the setting of a micro practice. So there are some limitations. The other thing I want to say as far as low overhead goes and picking a space, just don't overcommit to a space that is not ideal. I think that you can get started anywhere. I have clients that work in gyms. I have clients that work with other chiropractors. I have clients that work out of other healthcare facilities that are not chiropractors. I don't think that where you work out of is that big of a deal. But if it's a not ideal situation where, man, location's not great, the room's not great, the space isn't awesome, but I think I can make it work. Those are not things that you don't want to sign like a 3-year or 5-year lease on something like that. So just make sure that your commitment to a space and a place that's not ideal, if you're just getting started, is not super long. Like that would be a foolish thing to do. Like don't put yourself in a bad spot long-term while you're getting started. The things you put up with when you're getting started is not necessarily the things you're going to put up with a year later or 2 years later. So just keep that in mind. One chiro, one staff. Typically the way that I would frame this, if I was building a website for a chiropractor doing a micro practice, is I would talk about having direct access to the doctor. I think that's a better way of putting it, other than I work by myself and no one's here to help me. Like that's not the way you want to think about it. Within the context of the micro practice, you could communicate it in a way that makes sense. You communicate it in a way that is beneficial and sounds good. Like you don't have to deal with staff. You don't have to deal with talking to somebody else. You always get to work directly with the doctor. There's a personal element to a micro practice that you can really promote that you can't necessarily in other forms of practice quite as strongly. So direct access to the doctor is a good thing. Typically you're dealing with no insurance. I don't know that I've ever seen a genuine micro practice as I would define it that does insurance, because at that point you would be doing insurance billing and stuff. And I imagine that would be probably too much to do. And then you also have, with the one chiro, no staff. smart use of technology. And I would also put in there smart use of extra help. Because when I say no staff, I don't mean that you don't hire someone to help you with your social media or help you with your website or have somebody that helps edit videos you're doing if you're doing some online stuff, like having freelancers and different people that you're paying to help you with certain things. That's just leveraging technology, leveraging money, leveraging your time. Like that's a smart thing to do. And that sort of takes us into like the efficiency conversation. But a smart use of technology is important if you're a one chiro, no staff office. So things like texting, automation, online scheduling, those things are things that you're going to want to use, because otherwise you're going to get really overwhelmed with all the things that you have to do. Last thing we'll talk about is efficiency. We talked about low overhead. We talked about the one chiro, no staff. And then last thing is efficiency. I already said this with the one chiro is sort of overlaps is the smart use of technology. Smart use of time with your patients. And this goes into the conversation we're going to have about the services you offer and how much you can charge and things like that. Time is really, really important when you're in a micro practice, and you have to be smart about how you're using your time. If you're the type of person that you're like, man, I like to spend 3 hours with my new patient visit. It's like, well, that's going to be hard. Like that's going to be really rough to get, like, unless you're charging a ridiculous amount of money for your new patient visit, you're going to have to pull it back. Like you're going to have to like cut some of the fat. And this is true for patient visit time. If you're chatty, all this other stuff, you kind of have to be efficient. And that needs to be a key point if you're going to do a micro practice. Otherwise you're going to have a hard time with it. And so smart use of technology, smart use of time with your patients. It's important to teach patients to be good patients. And this is on you. Like you're in a leadership position as a chiropractor. It's important that you're teaching your patients how much time you're going to spend with them, what to do and not do, how to contact you, how to schedule appointments. I had a chiropractor years ago that told me, it says, well, he started using an online scheduler. And he's like, well, nobody's using it. They're all calling. And I'm like, are you answering the phone? And he's like, yeah. And I said, are you scheduling them on the phone? Yeah. I said, well, you haven't given them a reason to use your online scheduler. I said, don't answer the phone. And he kind of was like, what do you mean don't answer the phone? I said, don't answer the phone. Like, don't answer the phone when you know it's an existing patient, and send them a text and say, hey, sorry, I was with patients. If you want to schedule an appointment, go online and use our online scheduler. And when you talk to them next, hey, if you have you could tell them, like, if you have a question, I can call you back. But if you just need to schedule an appointment, use our online scheduler. As I'm getting more busy, it's really important that people use the online scheduler. That way that, I have time that I can spend with patients when they're here. However you want to say it, but it's your job to train them to do that. And if you're giving people permission to take up more of your time than what they should, or call you and schedule instead of texting you, or instead of using your online schedule, like that's on you. Like you're not training them well. Good patients are generally they don't stumble into your practice. They are created and made because of the habits and how you onboard them and how you teach them. And you have to hold yourself to a high standard too. Like you can't tell people that they're not allowed to monopolize your time and then you stand there and talk to them too much. Like that's so there needs to be a consistency with what you're teaching them and also with what you're doing yourself. And I'm not saying to be short with people. I'm just saying that whatever you need people to do and want people to do to fit within the parameters of your micro practice, it's your job to teach them that that's how you do things in your practice. And also, last thing I'll say about efficiency is just limit unnecessary repetition. Things like taking payments every time someone's in, stuff like that. I mean, you could have a card on file and charge those at the end of the day. Like there's ways of being more efficient. If you're doing something every single day and you could do it once a week, then do that. If you're doing something every month and you could do it once a quarter, then do that. And this is true for practice in general. One of the things I used to use as an example for this is I never particularly liked going through the mail when I was in practice. I felt like it was kind of a lot of headaches. And so my staff knew that they were going to, when the mail came in, they were going to go through the mail and they were going to pull out anything that looked like money or that looked like it was for them, something that they would handle. And everything else was going to go in this like holder that was on my wall in the office. And they knew, like, I did not look at it. Like I didn't look at any of that stuff, but once a month. At the end of the month, I would take this pile of stuff and I would sit down and I would literally just go through it as quickly as possible. And they would tell people, like, if they were going to get a hold of me or try to get a hold of me, they're like, oh, we'll just send him something in the mail. We're like, he's not going to read it right away. because I don't want to sit there and do this every single day. If I need to go through this stuff, I'm going to go through this stuff one time at the end of the month. Now that may not be what you want to do. And obviously if you don't have staff and you don't have somebody to kind of go through those things that seem important and they're going to handle those things, then you can't do something like that necessarily. But the idea is still solid. The idea is I don't want to do this every single day. It was that way when my accountant was trying to teach me how to use QuickBooks, which we got away from that real quick because I don't like doing that stuff. But once a month I was sitting down and trying to enter this information instead of doing it like every week. Like I don't want to do it every week. Like I don't like doing it. I'll just do it once a month. I eventually just had her do it, which is I just don't do it at all. So that's an efficient use of my time. All right. So those are the three fundamental parts of a micro practice: low overhead, single chiropractor, no staff, or one chiropractor, no staff. Should be single. You can be married, right? Maybe that's not the best word. And efficient. So what should you charge? So here's some things that you should be thinking about. One, I don't think you have to be the cheapest chiropractor in town just because you're a micro practice. Like I think that's ridiculous if you think that that's the case. I also don't think you have to be the most expensive. The idea of a boutique practice doesn't mean that you have to be the most expensive chiropractor. And I think that if you want to be the most expensive chiropractor around and you're just getting started, that's sort of a tough thing to do. Asking people to spend more money than what they would spend down the road with somebody else when you really have no proof of concept. Like you have no reputation, you have no authority. There's no, like you're not the go-to person. You're just a guy. Like you just got started. You're just a gal. Like you're just a nobody. I think that's a tough way to go. So I think the smart thing to do when you're getting started is to charge an appropriate amount for whatever services that you're offering. And what I mean by appropriate amount is somewhere in the range of what would be considered normal in your area. You could be slightly lower, you could be slightly higher. I think as long as it's in the range, that's fine. You don't have to be the cheapest and you don't have to be the most expensive. The most important thing is that your numbers make sense. This is a time money thing. This is true for all practice, but it is so true. Like it's incredibly true for micro practice. It's more true. Like if something could be more true, it's more true. And that's because if you mess this up, you are never going to make money in a micro practice. And what you have to be asking yourself is, am I charging an appropriate amount for how much time I'm spending with a patient? Because for instance, if you wanted to do just adjustments, let's say you spend 10 minutes with a patient and let's say there's some downtime, lag time, whatever, and you're averaging five patients an hour. And then you can charge $50. Well, that's $250 an hour that you have as a potential. Now, if you're spending 30 minutes with a patient, are you going to charge them $125 for that 30 minutes? I mean, maybe. And these are the numbers. And I'm just throwing out numbers. I'm not telling you what the appropriate number is. But are people going to spend $125 to spend 30 minutes with you? Maybe. Maybe you offer that as an option. You can't say, I'm going to charge $50 with someone and I'm going to spend 45 minutes with them. Like you can't do that. And you can't add a bunch of things that are going to take your time. And we'll get into this when we talk about services, but you can't get into a bunch of things that are going to take your time because now we're not being smart with our time. And now I'm going to spend like 3 or 4 times the amount of time with a patient, but I'm only going to charge them twice as much. Like if somebody just comes in for an adjustment, I charge them $50. But if somebody comes in for an adjustment and therapy and this and that and stretches and whatever, now I'm going to charge them $75, but I spent 4 times the amount of time with that person. You charge them 50% more and you spend 4 times the amount of time with them. That's not smart. Those numbers don't make sense. And so those are the questions that you have to ask instead of saying like, how much do I charge or how much do I don't charge? You have to ask like, how much money do I want to make? I remember talking to a guy years ago who got a hold of me and he was asking for some advice on some coaching advice and stuff. And he was talking to me about money. And he set down his goals for me and I looked at him and I said, these don't make sense. Like based on how you get paid, based on your fee structure, based on all of this stuff that you're giving me, this doesn't make any sense. Are you planning on working like twice as many hours as what you currently work? He's like, well, no, I don't want to work any more hours. And I showed him and I went through this with him. And I know sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, but I went through this with him and I'm like, look at this. This doesn't make sense. You can't get where you want to go with this plan, this formula. And what's really, really smart for you as a chiropractor is to sit down and figure this out before you get like 5 years into it and say, well, this doesn't make any sense. And I had this happen, and this is kind of, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I had a buddy of mine that was a personal trainer at a gym in my local area. And I knew the structure of the pay structure of the gym because I'd helped the gym with some SEO and website stuff and things like that. So I knew I knew him. So I knew the pay structure of the physical or the personal trainers that were at the gym. And I also knew that this is a great place for someone who's getting started. This is a great place for a college kid. This is a great place for someone who's single, who is just getting started within like the personal training space. This isn't a good place for a guy who's like married with kids, because you can't make enough money here to support being married with kids. Like this isn't, and he was the only one that worked there that was married with kids. And his structure might've been slightly different than what everybody else's was because he was considered like the head person, but I knew that it wasn't good. Cause I know how much they're charging. And I'm like, even if he's giving you everything from what you're charging, it's not enough. Like it's not enough for what you're doing. There's just not enough time in the day. And I remember the guy, he worked there for several years, and I saw him kind of out away from the gym. And he told me like, yeah, I started working at such and such. It was a different place. And I said, did you do the math? And he laughed and he's like, yeah, I did. I can't make enough money there. And I was like, yeah, like you could have known this 5 years ago. And I'm not saying he would have left. I don't know. I have no idea if he would have left or not left, but he was staying there under the assumption that he was going to make, if he just worked hard enough, he was going to make the kind of money that he wanted to make. That was never going to happen because the numbers didn't make any sense. So don't do this to yourself. Like, just don't. Like, that's dumb. Like, make sure your numbers make sense. If you want to charge more, here's the way to do it. You do it through authority. If you want to start off at a reasonable price, whatever's normal and expected in your area, but you eventually want to be like the guy who charges twice as much as everybody else or more, that comes through authority. Whether that's local authority, local celebrity, whether that's online, social media, some combination of the two. You're on the news, you wrote a book, you get on Joe Rogan. I don't know. There's lots of ways to get authority. But if you become seen in some way, shape, or form as like the go-to person, as better than the other chiropractors, as the more knowledgeable, the more skilled, the more cool, the more popular, the whatever. If there is a go-to element, and I would just put all of this under the umbrella of authority. If there's a go-to element to what you do, you can charge more. Starting off charging 2 or 3 times as much, that's rough. That's rough. But you can have a micro practice and charge far more than everybody else, but it's going to come through reputation, going to come through authority. People have to be willing to pay for it and want to pay for it. And there's also a limited access benefit to micro practice as well. Once you get to that point where it's like the reason you're charging more is because a bunch of people want your services and you have limited space and limited time. So you're going to charge more. And then people are willing to pay for it because they want to get access to you. So it sort of works that way. All right. So what services should you offer? These are the questions you want to ask. What makes sense for your situation? So the time, how much time are you going to spend with your patients? How much does it cost to set up? Does it fit within your space? Those are the questions you have to ask. So you don't want to start from the standpoint of saying like, well, what can I make money doing? That's not really the place you want to start from. You want to start from the place of what makes sense for my situation and my goals. What makes sense for my patients? So what type of patients do I see and what's going to help them out? Do they need this? Or is this an extra? You know, the adjustment doesn't require a lot of space. I think chiropractors who do the micro practice, who really, really focus on being great at adjusting, that's smart because it doesn't take up a lot of space. It doesn't take up a lot of time and you get really good results. Works really well. And the guy that got a hold of me that kind of sparked this whole podcast, and my client that asked me about it, he said, well, can you just do chiropractic? Yeah. A lot of micro practices just do chiropractic because it makes a ton of sense with the micro practice model. Doesn't require a lot of space, doesn't require a lot of time, doesn't require a lot of money, and it gets great results. So if you're really, really great at adjusting, I don't know that there's anything else you have to do. But if you want to do soft tissue, you want to do therapies, you want to do whatever, does it make sense for your situation? Time, space, cost, all that stuff. Does it make sense for your patients? Do they actually need it? Or are you just adding time and adding services and just kind of messing up your whole thing? And what can you charge what can you get paid appropriately for? If you're going to spend 5 times the amount of time with a person, can you get paid 5 times the amount of money for that? If the answer is no, and people aren't going to pay for it, it doesn't really work with the model. You can't, when you're in a micro practice situation, and this is true for regular practice as well, like you just can't let your personal preference of treating, like I want to spend 45 minutes with somebody, I want to spend an hour with all of my patients. Fine, but you have to charge appropriately. And if there's going to be not enough people that are willing to pay you $200 an hour to work on them, or $300 an hour to work on them, or whatever you're going to charge them, then at best that needs to be offered as a secondary or tertiary option, where it's like, that's not normally what I do, but if somebody wants to pay for it, they can get the whole hour. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with having it as an option if somebody wants to do it. But building a practice on that when there's not a lot of people that are going to do it or want to do it, that's tough. And only you can really answer that question. And maybe it requires a little experimenting where it's like you throw it out there and you see if people want to pay for it or willing to pay for it. I mean, a lot of practice is just trial and error. So it's okay to not know and just say, well, I don't know, but let's just try it and see how it works. And then you pivot accordingly. The good news about all of this is if you're running a micro practice and you do the first thing right, which is low overhead, you have a lot of margin to try things out. And so if you try it and it doesn't work, like what's the bad thing that happened? You probably still made money that month because you don't have a lot of overhead. So that's the beautiful thing about it. And I've worked with a lot of chiropractors over the years, and the ones that I have seen go from not making enough money to having their head above water and making enough money to where they have a little bit of breathing room. The chiropractors I've seen who've made that jump the quickest all have run micro practices. I've never seen a chiropractor run a non-micro practice that has gone extremely quickly from I'm not making enough money to a month or two later, I got my head above water and I'm at least surviving and I'm doing okay. That generally happens because you have low overhead, and the way you have low overhead is due to a micro practice. Screw your pride and screw what everybody else thinks. It's a really great way to get started, especially in this day and age for young chiropractors. And if you've never seen it done, like ask around, look around. There are people on social, there's tons of people that are doing micro practices that are doing very, very well. And so if anybody craps on it or you're crapping on it yourself, just don't do that. You're probably making your life harder than it has to be. And it's a really great way to start a practice. All right, guys, that's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you know a chiropractor who could benefit from the podcast, please share it with them, because this podcast is not a big deal and not enough people listen to it. If you've ever left a review, thank you. I appreciate it. If you're willing to leave a review, I think that would be awesome, and I would love that. If you would like some help, go to Rocket Chiro. I can do a website and SEO assessment for you. If you're ready to get started, you can reach out to me through there. I'll be happy to help you however I can. I'll talk to you on the next episode. See ya.